Hello friends! Today this vlog kicks off the official competition of which group of people gives the best recommendations or has the best favorites list from 2024. We're pitting YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and my channel members all against each other to see where I can find the most new favorite 5-star books. There's gonna be 4 vlogs, 2 in January, 2 in February. We're starting with my members because I've had their data for the longest. They have all, well, a lot of them have participated in adding their favorites to this spreadsheet, and I have been scouring it. I've been highlighting every single book I've given 4 or 5 stars and then figuring out who has the most in common. Basically, I took the top 20 people with the most in common and I added up my ratings of everything that they listed and I came up with a number in the end. The bestie with the highest score was Liv with 47. I have read every single thing from her top 10. So I don't have anything to choose from here, but I am waiting for her to share any honorable mentions on her socials. So there might be a late entry to this video. I want to have exactly 5 books in each one. So I might swap something later, but also she has an active Instagram and YouTube, so I might just add her into one of those videos later. With 45 points, we have Coley. Coley and I not only have 9 things in common, but every single one of them was a 5-star. I have followed Coley on Instagram for a while and I figured she would be in one of these episodes, but she's not super active right now, but she did add to the spreadsheet. So I'm so excited to be reading The Bear by Andrew Krivak. This is a shorter book than I thought, and I have no idea what it is. Like, I've seen the cover, and I always mix it up with the bear, that one with like the fur of the bear in a lady's hand. I thought that's what it was when I saw it listed, and I was like, oh, I think that's a weird one. This, I'm not sure what it is. The next highest score with 44 points is Diana. Now, Diana and I have so much in common, but there's only one thriller on her list, and it's the one thing on her list I haven't read. So I am gonna end up reading The Trap by Catherine Ryan Howard, but I have no idea if we share taste in mystery thrillers. So this is definitely a riskier pick. There's a car on the front, which I don't know if this is a road trip story. I don't like road trip stories. I'm scared to read it, but I'm also intrigued because I really want to read more mystery thrillers this year. Tied with 43 points, we had Hannah and Samir. These were 2 people who were featured in the videos where I was guessing people's favorites because we had so much in common, and I was just itching to see what their #1 pick was. I have read everything from Samir's list except for one thing, and that's a graphic novel. I thought Samir was messing with me. All my favorites on their list and then an eyeball book that I was forced to read. But Samir commented and is confirmed a real person. I do indeed like Sarah Gailey, so I'm going to give this a go. I have a feeling I'm not actually going to include this in the 5. It's just going to be a little bonus one because there's no way that I like a graphic novel. And I just don't think this is fair to include, but I'm going to read it because Samir told me to. Now with Hannah's list, I have also read everything from it. And I mentioned in the video, I was like, Hannah, if you have any honorable mentions, let me know. Hannah kindly commented. And again, her entire list she left me, I've read everything on it except for 2 things. 1, a graphic novel, but 2, a book already on my TBR shelf, and that's The Bear and the Nightingale. I grabbed this from, I think, a library book sale last year, maybe the year before. Everyone tells me I'm gonna love this, and the fact that Hannah and I have so much in common, favorites and honorable mentions, like there's no way I don't love this. With 42 points, we have Mintu, who only has 1 thing unread on the list for me to choose from, and that's Psalm of the Wild Belt. This was a book that was really prominent on the spreadsheet overall, so I am excited to read it. I'll also share some of the books that popped up the most later in the video so you can know what the besties are really into. I'm excited to delve into that. I don't really know what this book is. I've read from Becky Chambers before. I know it's sci-fi. I think it's short, and it's gonna be my audiobook of the vlog. Then with 41 points, we have Bestie Becca. And again, the only thing for me to choose from is No One Can Know by Kate Alice Marshall, which is a book already on my TBR. So I'm excited to get into this one. We do have similar taste, I know, in mystery and thriller books based on her list. So it's definitely gotten some mixed reviews, and I'm excited to see what side I lie on. The last Kate Alice Marshall I gave a 4-star to. So this is very promising. So this is gonna be my TBR for the video, minus this one. Like, I'm gonna read it, but it's not gonna count to like the official 5 that are being submitted into the competition. I'm excited to see if I continue to have favorites in common with the besties, and I'm excited that I've included anybody who got over 40 points. There were so many with like 39, 38, and there are a lot of books that I almost read for this video, but don't fret because they're still on my radar now. So if you really want me to get to anything here, I'm sure it could happen for me in the future. We're gonna get right into it. I'm gonna try to read 2 books today, The Bear and The Trap. Okay, I have made it through the first half of The Bear. This is definitely like a 2-sitting kind of read. It's not that specific page. Let me pull up a page. I don't know. You can tell it's like pretty quick of a read. Like it's not going edge to edge, and it's really cut off regularly. So I wish, I'm just gonna make myself a yogurt bowl for lunch while I talk to you briefly. The number one thing I wish is that I hadn't so recently read The Road by Cormac McCarthy, because this also is written in like the exact same way, and it has no character names, it has no indication of dialogue, and it's like, I don't know, just looking at them both, the title is so simple, The Road, The Bear. The cover is so minimal, and the content is so similar, and it just feels like somebody read The Road and was like, I want to write my version of The Road, but make it much more lush with like physical items, like the actual scenery, and connecting with nature, and have it more of that kind of story. So it's a father and daughter, and they are the last people on Earth from what they understand, and they're just surviving. Right now it's just a story of survival, and he is teaching her about the land and how to appreciate everything that the land is giving them. In that way, it feels like kind of a fairy tale or a folk tale that has this message of respecting nature and appreciating what you have. And they have to like kill animals and eat animals, and it's like respecting the animals and showing them appreciation when you kill them. It is a very well described story. Like it has beautiful writing. I don't think that this is something I would in any realm ever dislike. It's just kind of an apocalyptic story, but it's very quiet, very intimate, and very unexplained. Like we don't really understand what the world looks like or how the world got to be what it is. Reminds me obviously a little bit of The Blue Book of Nebo, which is a book that I absolutely loved, like one of my top reads of the year. So this absolutely fits. Just lost my place. I think I can find it. Love this bookmark, but it's a slippery fella. Much like The Road, I feel a tragedy is coming, and I feel like it'll probably be a 4-star by the end. I just looked at it on Goodreads, and Coley actually read it in 2021. So either she reread it and loved it and wanted to include it, or she specifically added it to the spreadsheet to force me to read it, which I wouldn't put past her. And I'm really glad to be doing so. Like it's a nice story. I could see why it's on someone's favorites, and I could see why somebody would think that it would be for me. All right, I'm gonna eat this, read this, and then tell you my rating. As anticipated, I'm giving this, am I giving it a full 4? I might be giving it a 3.75. I think that this is easily recommendable. It's exactly, I was gonna say exactly what you expect. I didn't really know what it was going into it, but once I came to understand what it was and reading the synopsis, it's exactly the story you expect it to be. It has lovely language, but it's not incredibly impressive. Like it's not the most moving thing. It didn't do anything particularly life-changing for me, but it's just an easy, good, like solid story. And the way the bear comes into it, and it says in the synopsis, is that she finds herself alone, and the bear leads her back home, and she gets a lot of lessons. It does feel very folksy in that way. It is a bunch of her learning, like, I don't know, like to listen to nature, to listen to the trees. The trees are the voices of the forest. The river is this of the forest. The land is so important, and it's all about respect and appreciation and love, and how powerful nature is, and how there's nobody left, but it still feel like the world is still so rich, and the world is thriving without people. Yeah, I can give that a 4. I feel like it's a 4. This year, I'm not going to figure out my ratings like for each video the way that I did last time. Basically, if a book got a 4 or a 5-star, I gave it a star towards the video, and it was like, which video got the most stars? And when it comes to math, maybe I shouldn't be doing it. So I'm just gonna give the video so far 4 points because I gave this a 4, which makes a lot more sense. I don't need to get silly and unique with it. And I can't wait to see how many points the video racks up by the end. I was gonna go for a walk in between reading today because I need to do something. I've just been so busy the last like 3 weeks. I have filmed something and posted something every single day. I've been busy like outside doing stuff. Obviously it was the holiday season, and it just feels weird to do nothing, but I kind of want to do nothing because I went out to get Liam's pick up his hockey stuff and drive him and some friends for lunch during their lunch hour, obviously. And then I was gonna go for a walk, and it's so cold. There's like no snow and the temperature doesn't look crazy, but the wind, oh my God, it was like instantly freezing. So I'm not gonna go for a walk today. And I'm feeling a little lazy, but at least like I'm being productive with my reading and with my content. So that makes me feel better. I'm reading The Trap, and the first chapter definitely did not hook me. I think it would for other people though. It was 14 pages of this woman getting, what does it say? It says Lucy's gonna take matters into her own hands. So the first chapter is her trying to get kidnapped, basically. She believes that there is somebody taking women and murdering or kidnapping women, and one of them is her sister. Her sister has been missing for a year, and so she walks up and down that road late at night and tries to get picked up by somebody. I think some people would be very into that type of storyline and be really hooked by that first chapter, kind of like, what other book can I think of? I can only think of Sadie right now, where she's just like desperately doing anything she can to track down who took her sister. But then after the first chapter, we switched to a different perspective of a police officer. And I was like, oh, okay, it's gonna go back and forth between this woman and this police officer, and they're gonna work together to figure out where her sister is. And then the next chapter was from a killer. It was like from this guy. He was like, oh, I'm in my living room watching TV with my wife, and she doesn't know that I'm hurting all of these women. So the thing about this so far is it seems really straightforward, and therefore I'm sitting here thinking there has to be a twist. Like, there obviously, we're either reading from a perspective that isn't real, or things are out of sort, out of time, out of order, and I'm being like tricked into something. I'm not gonna harp on what I think is happening. That's just the first thing that came to mind, because like a woman with a sister missing, a detective who wants to find out what's happening, and there's the killer's perspective. Like, that's all too easy. So I am intrigued. I'm not gonna think too much about like how things are actually happening, but I'm not trusting the book at this point. So that's the first 50 pages, and we'll see how everything connects and if we get more perspectives and how things go from here. I am 2/3 of the way through at this point, and the biggest pro for this is it's very readable. Because of the different perspectives, things are constantly moving, and there are a couple different questions. The questions are, what happened to her sister, and who does the man that we're reading from, like, what is he up to, what is he doing, who is he holding, because he's clearly speaking to somebody in his chapters. Interestingly, the woman that we're following, she's not a detective actually, but she is working with a detective, or they're called, what are they called, the Garda. It's set in Ireland, and she wants to be a guard, but she hasn't passed like the test yet. But there is another woman who is, and they're working together, looking through some evidence and like trying to connect all of the missing women. Some people on the force are more interested in that, some are less. There might be some corruption. And as someone who doesn't love a detective POV very often, this is something that it is very good for me, because it's not a detective. It's still somebody who feels a little bit amateur, but they're alongside a detective, and it's like she's messing up, she has questions. It's just an interesting perspective to follow for sure. The con is there's no way that this book is going to shock me by the end. I think I've solved both of the two things that are going on, and that's a bummer, because all I really want from a thriller is to be entertained and surprised. I'm not entertained, I am interested, and if I somehow end up surprised, that would be great, and this could get like a high 3. Right now it just feels like kind of an average mystery thriller, which is a bummer, not for this video specifically or this book. It's not about that. It's like, I want to read more mystery thrillers that I love in 2025, but it's so hard to know which ones are going to be good. And I've just read so many that are all so similar that it's hard to find ones that truly catch me off guard at this point. I think that's why I've really been into like the more fun, cozy ones, because when I go into them, I'm looking for a vibe that isn't the shock factor. Things that I need from a cozier or fun mystery, like everyone in my family has killed someone, or every time I go on vacation someone dies, or Finley Donovan or Vera Wong. I would like to be surprised, but there are other things to enjoy outside of that, because it's like found family, or it's the fun like tongue-in-cheek writing. And when I just pick up a mystery or thriller, like there's nothing that I'm really loving about it, so I'm waiting to be surprised. So cross your fingers for me that the final third does something great. So I just finished The Trap, and I don't know how to rate it. I want to give it, for most of it, it was a 3. I predicted 2 things for sure. Like 2 things were very blatantly obvious to me that were happening. But there was an extra thing. And for anyone who's read it, like that last chapter, that did get me. But it didn't get me until like 15 minutes later, because I realized that there are larger implications for what that chapter is. It's not just the quick thing that comes to mind that it's explaining. It's actually like there are multiple chapters in here that mean something different. And that is very interesting. And I like that. I like that I didn't see it coming. Even though I got a vibe for that concept coming, I didn't fully understand everything until it was revealed to me. So that was really nice, but it doesn't affect the entire story and my enjoyment of it. I think there were certain storylines and red herrings that weren't fully developed the way that they could have been, and they weren't because they were red herrings, but I was just left a little unsatisfied by certain things. I liked the shifting perspectives. I know that a lot of people love a villainous perspective, and like, you know, the bad guy and you're hearing from him and he's saying all the bad things that he's gonna do. That's not my favorite thing. I've liked it a couple times, but in general, like, I don't love that. I don't need that. But the amount that was in here, it was well placed and it was done with a purpose. A 3.5 feels right for this. I'm happy to have read it. I can definitely see how this would be somebody's favorite thriller of the year. I don't think it has mass appeal, but I see it. And I'll see you tomorrow with the next one. Good morning, everyone. It's very early. We're heading to the ski hill, and I have a toque that matches my book. So I feel like this is the only right choice for today. What do you think? I'm just gonna be hanging out in the lodge while Liam snowboards. So I'm gonna read this. And I'll see you when we're there. I think I'm one of the first people here. So there's 2 couches in here. Hopefully I get one. Hell yeah. And this is where I'm gonna plonk my butt for the next 3 hours. The fireplace is quite warm. Okay, we're headed home. That wasn't the most exciting amount of vlogging to be had. I just sat there and I planned a video and then I read this, and that's pretty much it. And now it's 3 hours later and we're headed home. Liam had a great time. He's currently now walking through the snow in Birkenstocks, so that's a choice. And this, as expected, I'm not going to count towards what I was reading for this video because it was so short and I didn't like it because it's a graphic novel. So I don't need it to be a part of it, but I'm glad that I read it anyway, gave another graphic novel a chance. I don't need to like put a rating out there because I don't need my average rating of the year to go down. And this wasn't something authentically on my TBR. And we're just gonna, like, other things aren't either, but we're just gonna forget this ever happened. So what Eat the Rich is it's this story of a girl who goes with her boyfriend to the family home, and she encounters something horrific that's going on in the like estate. They're very wealthy. They have all of these friends, and there is a kind of ritual that goes on. It is in the monster, vampire, zombie realm, as you'd expect, but it doesn't say specifically here like what is exactly happening. So I don't know how much imagery would be a spoiler, but there is, let's see what I can show you. I can show you this. There's like some mundane activities of her hanging out with like the nanny. There's definitely some queer representation in here. There's her. She's scared lying in bed because she saw something, and it's clearly bloody. What is most interesting is to think about this becoming this instead of a novel. Would I have preferred it as a novel? I don't think so, because in a graphic novel, you're not, well, I mean, I'm sure it depends, but you're not really getting storyline and plot and like exposition. It's more so about the dialogue and getting to see the scenes. It's like there are certain horror movies that I love, but I wouldn't want to read as a book because the visuals are important. And there's definitely something to be said for somebody who can write a horror novel and the description can be so atmospheric and so gross and so thorough that you do get a picture of what it's like. But in this regard, there are so many things that you just need to see visually. So this was the best way to consume consume this type of story, especially seeing like the blanket fear on people's faces. That's really valuable. The little tender moments between characters. I think it would have bogged down the scary story if it was explaining, sorry if that scared you, if it was explaining how characters were feeling. It's more about the actual plot and the scary things that are going on for this character. Good afternoon. Today, I'm feeling stressed, so I'm gonna walk it off. I just got back from a doctor's appointment for Liam and left it with an inhaler, so hopefully this improves what he's dealing with, because he had COVID 7 weeks ago now, and his cough is still like pretty horrendous. Not horrendous, but like it's not getting better. And we were so focused on his mouth and his ulcers because he was having this like viral thing, and that cleared up really quickly. But I think his body was so focused on, like, that's how I imagine it, focused on like healing that his lungs are just not getting better. And he took weeks off for winter vacation, and now he's back in hockey like 6 days a week. And he's just not one to like also go easy on himself. He's the captain of his team, and he's like doing everything that's expected of him and wants to keep up, but he like has to sit out so often and take breaks, and he's just not feeling well. The other day he fainted. His oxygen level at the doctor was a 94, which like isn't horrendous, but obviously isn't ideal. So I'm just hoping that like this does something, but also he just like can start to feel better on his own. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do to make his lungs feel better, and it's just, he's in pain, like they hurt him. Anyway, I dropped him back off at school, and I'm just gonna go for a walk, and I'm gonna listen to some of the Wild Built until I'm gonna walk until I'm done. I'm curious why this one is so popular this year, actually. If you could let me know. Was there someone, like, did it get re-promoted in a certain way, or is it just one of those sci-fi books that have longevity, so everybody just happens to be reading it? Was it part of a book club? Like, just so many people have been reading it this year.
Presents A Song for the Wild Built.
Why do you not pronounce the P at all? Like, I know with tsunami, like people just pronounce it tsunami, but there's a T, so you're supposed to say tsunami, technically. Are you supposed to say psalm, or are you just supposed to say psalm with a hard S? Because that upsets me.
By Becky Chambers.
How long is this?
For anybody who could use a break. If you ask 6 different monks.
For anyone who needs a break. Me! Right now. What the fuck? Having to click I'm not a robot in order to access the audiobook on Everhand is very funny. This is about robots, right? I think the series is called The Robot and Monk. Okay, the audiobook is 4 hours. I'm not doing anything else, so I can probably listen to it on 3 times speed, if that's like the way that the narrator sounds good in my ears, and I'll be going on a 1.3 hour walk. Okay, feeling much better. Looking rougher, for sure. I went on a color walk, which is harder to do in the winter season than any other, but it's where you like pick a color and then you let that guide how your walk goes. Like I was looking for the color red, so every time I saw red, that decided like there was a bush, a berry bush, and so it was on the left-hand side. So the next turn that I turned left. There was like an electrical box or whatever with a red sticker. So then I went up the stairs right next to it. The red car had me going a certain way. And then in my own driveway at the end, I found a little like Remembrance Day poppy in my rocks that must have fallen out of my vehicle. And it just guided me home. I feel like the color walks are really good for noticing your environment and paying attention and just like appreciating what's around you. Also, I realized from earlier, I should have chosen other words with a silent P rather than ones that are just words from a different language. Though a lot of words with a silent P are probably originally Greek, but I am gonna start saying psalm regularly and psychologist just because I feel like it. and you can't stop me. I did listen to the entirety of my book and I thought it was lovely. I think it's definitely the kind of thing that I could see why is somebody else's favorite or why it is a whole bunch of people's favorite. It's that cozy sci-fi. I think I like cozy fantasy more than cozy sci-fi. I am giving it a 4. And the story is basically, we're following a tea monk, and their job at the beginning, Dex, they like get into this position. They want to learn how to make tea and be this entity for people to come and buy tea. They pick like the perfect tea and it's supposed to soothe their ailments. So if you're feeling stressed or you can't sleep, the tea is meant to help you. And it's also an almost therapy session. Like they come up for their tea, and Dex is meant to, sibling Dex is what they're known as. They're meant to sit and like, you know, have people share their thoughts, and then they share the tea, and it's this beautiful experience. So we see them get into that, and then rather than just existing in that career, they pretty quickly discover that they're burning out and they need a break and they want more alone time, and they go on this little trip by themselves. And it's dealing with like the guilt of leaving the tea stuff behind and not like being where they're expected to be for the first time, and not pulling up in their vehicle and everybody comes up and gets their tea. So it deals with like the idea of disappointing people and like making your own path. And even if you're in a job that is perfectly suited for you or that you enjoy, you still need breaks, and you need to find always need to be rediscovering your passions. And in that journey, they come upon this robot, and we get a brief description at the beginning of how robots came to be, how humans created them, and how they took over so many jobs and how humans made them a certain thing, and then also the expectations of these robots. And so there's a robot and Dex, and humans and robots haven't connected in so long, and the robot wants to understand humanity. And so is asking Dex all of these questions, and Dex, I guess, gets to feel useful in a different way. And they both learn things from each other. And there's just all of these great quotes about life and the experience of living. And it was just really nice. It was really soft. I believe at this point I have gotten 11.5 points. That's the score out of a possible 15. So we will see as I continue with the books how it all goes. I think I'm gonna start that thriller tonight, the other one on my list by Kate Alice Marshall, and I'll let you know how everything's going tomorrow. So I got to the 30% mark of No One Can Know last night, and I am bored. I'll tell you that much. But this morning, I've gotten to about the 50% mark, and something exciting did just happen. And so now I don't feel like this is the most interesting story ever still, but it happened at the perfect time where I was really burning out on this book. So if I look at Becca's favorites, a lot of the thrillers are ones that I read years ago, and they do have to do with like, well, some of them like sister dynamics. There's slower parts, there's faster parts. They're not like the most action heavy books. There's a lot of internal stuff, and this definitely fits in with that. And maybe I would have liked this more like 4 years ago. It's told in a couple different timelines, which is fun. In one of them, we're building up to the death of these 3 sisters' parents. They were in their teens when their parents died. And now in the current day timeline, we're following one mostly, and her situation with her husband. They have had some issues, and they, for reasons, have to move into her childhood home, this one, where her parents lived. It's like a nice fancy home, and they are going through all of their old stuff, but they're also living there. And I thought it would be more of like a creepy story where she was really reluctant to move in and scary things were happening, but that's not really the vibe. They're kind of just like there. They're just like sleeping in her parents' bed, and it's like, it doesn't really matter. And so the question is, do they not really care what happened to their parents? And in the flashbacks, we're getting a better idea of the family dynamics. And we do get all of the sisters' perspectives and what they were doing that night, and it's leading up to this big dramatic murder. It could be any of the sisters, it could be anyone that they knew, it could be people they've never met. Like, there are so many potential people that could have killed their parents, and I'm assuming it's going to be one of those books where it's not just one answer. There's multiple things that were going on at the same time, because that's just the types of mysteries, not just that Kate Alice Marshall writes, but the kind of mysteries that exist right now. You don't get a ton of just classic whodunits where there's a person and slowly the clues lead to that person, and then you find out one person did something. Like there's different, even if not more than one person had to do with the murders, there is bad things that were also happening with other people. For some reason, while I know we have a main character and the girls have very different characteristics, I find that I'm getting them mixed up when it's going in the past timeline. It's like this sister was doing this sister was the people pleaser, this sister was the one dating a boy her parents didn't like and causing arguments. I'm like forgetting who was who, but now there's more of an active current day thing happening as well, so there's an extra mystery, and that's definitely increasing my interest. But I don't know, right? It's just fine. It's just fine. And I think while I do reading sprints with my channel members today, I'm gonna pop in the audiobook and just get through the last like hour and a half. I'm so tired of reading books, mystery books, where we're about to get the answer to something and someone is having like a memory, like they forgot their memory and they're like, oh, I remember this, I remember this, I remember this, I remember this. And then right before they're about to like remember who killed somebody or that they killed somebody, the chapter changes. Like, it's to build the suspense. I understand the purpose of it. I'm just like, just so aware that I'm reading a book. And that's, I think, maybe my issue with this genre lately, is that I never feel in the story. I feel what the author is intending me to feel, and I can never be fully like wrapped up in it. It's very irritating. Wait, I think I unlocked why I'm liking the cozier mystery thrillers. Did you already make the connection? Because those ones are so clearly like aware of their reader and like are talking to me directly, telling me that they're a book and that they're actively writing a book. They're like, here are all the clues, I'm laying it out for you, how fun. That's why those have been working for me, because I don't want the mystery books to like pretend I don't exist, because I'm just so aware of what they're trying to do that it's better if you just let me in on the fact that you are already keeping things from me. Like everyone in my family's killed someone. He's like talking directly to us and he's like, I'm not gonna give everything away right now, just hold your horses. And like, I'm specifically writing this in a certain way. I'm just getting frustrated when I can't get fully immersed in a book, and those are the only ones in the genre that are allowing me to do that. I get immersed because it's purposely letting me in. Does this make any sense? I'm like 30 pages from the end and I'm excited to wrap it up. Everyone in the chat's telling me to DNF, but then I would have to pick a whole nother book and a whole nother bestie. And I feel bad because the besties video is the one that went like not very good last year. I don't think I ended up with a 5-star, and I'm starting to feel like I'm not gonna end up with one this time either. I have gone from not liking this book, just being like, oh, it was whatever. I'm just like not in the mood for thrillers and it's just not doing anything for me, but like it's fine, I'll recommend it. I'm hot, I'm red. Do you see me? I hated this book. I have beef with this book. You get like 4 different reveals on like in like 2 pages at the very end. It's just back to back to back to back. And then like a stupid little love story and then this big reveal, and then where the chapter title comes in where it's just so stupid. And then the book wouldn't end. There was chapter after chapter after chapter that we were just hammering home stupid shit. I don't care. I don't care. All right, I've given myself a second to reflect and think about what I wanted to say about the book. I just think it's so crazy that, okay, first of all, this was already on my TBR. So I'm really glad that Becca was in that live show so she could get a heads up that I was going to be talking about this book in this way. I actually think this is a really good recommendation for people who loved The Good Daughter, which is one of her favorites. And I wonder now, because I read that maybe 4 years ago, if I would love it the same. It just seems so crazy that when I go on Goodreads, everyone has given this like a 4-star and I hated it. Meanwhile, I gave this a 4-star and everybody hates it. Kate Alice Marshall, apparently more polarizing than I ever knew. This is what you might expect from it as far as the sisterhood story. And if that's what you're looking for, it does that. These girls have a commitment. They're protecting each other, whether they're estranged or close, whether they remember or don't, whether they're guilty or innocent, they are protecting each other. They had this specific childhood. They're the only people who know what happened, just like every other sibling dynamic, whether you like each other or you don't. You have such a unique experience because you're the only ones who grew up in your home. So they have an understanding of each other that nobody else has, and they feel committed to their sisterhood. I think what people might also like about this is the idea of wanting a better life, like finding hope or love or whatever you need that you didn't feel like you had growing up, either from your parents, your siblings, yourself, your partners. Everyone in this book had something that they were desiring in life and were working towards getting it, whether they're a good person or not. I think that's kind of an underlying theme that isn't the purpose of this book. It's a thriller. It's not a life journey, but there is a lot of takeaways that I think people could appreciate with these characters. The reasons it didn't work for me, I thought it was just very dull. I didn't think that the ways that the characters were interacting made a whole lot of sense. It didn't feel super consistent. Or it didn't feel like we were 14 years in the future. It felt like all this had happened 6 months ago. The ways that people were interacting for the first time in 16 years was as if they had just spoken. And I think there's something to be said about a small town and people not changing. And especially like people have a certain idea of you. And when you come back to your small town, they expect you to be the same and you expect them to be the same, but they were the same. Like everybody was the same person. Everyone had the same dialogue as if they were 15 years old. And again, I think you can, explain that away by maybe it's hard to grow up when there's been this tragedy and you are stuck in the self that you were. In the small towns, they do that, but there was no purpose for it being 14 years later. So either make it really evidently clear it's 14 years later or don't make it that far in the future at all. Like maybe there could have been something about the reasons why it took this long for something to happen, or after a certain amount of years that something was going on. But instead it was just like, oh, there's been a secret for 14 years. And then suddenly like they all figured it out. And it did have a kind of layered reveal. It had multiple reveals, but they weren't twists. I really wanted a twist. I said halfway through, I was in the live show and I was like, I don't really care how it ends. I don't think that's going to impact my rating of the book. But it did. It brought it from like a 2.5 to a 1.5 because I don't really like the reveals. I don't think that they were done well. I think it's really convenient. And I think it was just absolute whiplash. The way this turned from a mystery to a thriller, and then in 10 pages, like all of this chaos happened, every reveal, and they weren't twisty, like it didn't go over the top reveals. It was just like, okay, here's everything that happened. Like, here's all the secrets that the authors kept from me, or people were keeping from each other, or people were keeping from themselves with like repressed memories. It just suddenly all came out and it was done. But then also leading up to that, it was just boring. It was a really sad girl book. And that feels shitty to say because she's been through a tragedy, but that's just not what I wanted to be reading about. She was just so sad all the time. Like that's what the story was. And if I wanted a sad girl book, I'd read lit fic. She was sad about her job and she was sad about her marriage and she was sad about, do we want this baby or not? The police don't believe me. Maybe my husband doesn't believe me. And I've spoken recently about how it's just really exhausting to me when there are these books about just awful men being awful, and it's like just an abusive book and it's 300 pages of just like a terrible man, whether it's like the husband or the actual like villain kidnapping people, or it's like the policeman who's been after you all these years. Like there's always like this terrible man in a book, and there needs to be a proper balance of how much of him is in it. And in this one, like we had 3 of them. It was just like men being shitty for so long. That's just not the type of book for me at this point in my reading is going to get 5 stars. Having to endure that for so long, even if there is a purpose behind it and it's like getting to understand characters, it's just like sad. It's just so sad to trudge through. For what? I definitely in my current reading want to have more fun with a thriller. I would recommend this probably to fans, like people who love Alice Feeney or Frida McFadden. And it's always good to know. It's good to get in tune with my own reading taste and find out what I like and what I don't like. This was on my TBR. I added this. And now I feel like I have to read another Kate Alice Marshall. This isn't steering me away from her. It's making me think, well, I need to read a third one to see if it's going to be a big win or a big loss. And then I can either write her off in the future, or like this one was just kind of a dud. It's hard to know, and I hate being in this limbo of not knowing if an author is for me or not. This wasn't poorly written. It just wasn't written for me. I have begun my last book. In fact, I'm halfway through The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, and I'll give you a quick update in just a moment. But first, we need to talk about the spreadsheet and the books that are on it the most, because I just think it's really interesting data. I wasn't even thinking when I made this spreadsheet of people's favorites how valuable it would be to people, but if you watched my like guessing video where I was guessing people's #1 favorites, one of them, Rob, was in it for a second, and he was like, these people pay for your membership to access a spreadsheet, and we laughed it off, and I explained to him no, like what it actually is. And then a bunch of my members were talking about it, and they were like, no, like I would pay like the $6 monthly thing. Like it was more than worth its money just this month that I got to see this spreadsheet. Obviously I found it really useful for me because I'm finding things to read, but so can you. Like you can just search your favorite book and somebody has it on there. Like there are 800 people who filled this out, and you can see everything else that they've not just read but loved. Obviously you can get recommendations from social media in general and Goodreads and Storygraph, and they have these great websites that exist where you can type in a book and find like a comp title. But that doesn't tell you that you might also love the book necessarily. So I just think that the spreadsheet is really handy for the people who are finding people who have so much in common with them, and they're like, oh, here's a book I've literally never heard of, an indie book, something that might not ever be recommended on one of these other websites, something that came out like 50 years ago that I just wouldn't have compared to this book. So I'm just so glad that people are finding a really good use out of the spreadsheet. And I have tracked, well, first I wanted to see of my favorites of the year, what I've influenced the most people to read. And obviously this isn't like everyone on my channel, this is just a select few, but the most common thing that I read that everybody else was reading and loving this year is We Used to Live Here. 63 of my members logged that as a favorite of the year. Next in line was I Was a Teenage Slasher, and then The Husbands with like 40 something each. 21 people read the Blue Book of Nebo, and I think I can take a good amount of credit for that because of like when it came out. I like to think about I did the bookish survey and I never posted it, but in it I was talking about the books that I've influenced the most people to read and how it's hard to know for sure which ones I was responsible for. But I think that one and Knock Knock Open Wide, like a good amount might have come from me. The Haunting of Belkwood, and then How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying. Sky Full of Elephants only had one person that I read that really late in the year, so I don't know if people are taking that as a recommendation. And then not a single person logged the autobiography of Red by Anne Carson, which is really devastating. I'm wondering if people read it and didn't love it, or just nobody ended up reading it. Books that were mentioned on the spreadsheet that I've already read are Funny Story, got the most with 85. That's the only one I think on here. Oh no, there's another one that I didn't love, but the other ones are some of my favorites of the year as well. Like The God of the Woods, I Who Have Never Known Men. I think those were popular just on their own, but I'm sure like a couple people read them specifically because of me. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies still making numbers with 49 people as their favorite. And then the sequel, Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, got a good amount. Vera Wong got a good amount. Trust of the Emerald Sea, Bride is on there. Nothing to See Here, horror movie, and Bunny were the most frequently mentioned things that I've also read. And then books that I haven't read that showed up the most on the spreadsheet are Just for the Summer, which I'm not interested in reading, but it had 62 people who absolutely loved it. The Tainted Cup, which I do have on my TBR now. Bright Young Women, which I don't think I'm interested in. The Will of the Many, which I will be reading. Annie Bot, which I would consider. Blood Over Bright Haven I'm interested in. Someone You Can Build a Nest In, which I DNF'd and watched a full spoiler video about. I definitely see why people love that one. The Rachel Incident, which I barely know anything about. Blue Sisters is an interesting one that I might consider. And then Martyr. Martyr is one that I'm interested in, and I was hoping it would show up in one of these videos where I could read a favorite because I've just seen some interesting things about that one. So maybe I'll end up reading it at some point. Now, The Bear and the Nightingale. I have not taken a single note. I haven't put in a single tab. I think the writing is nice, but I just don't feel anything towards it. And it feels so strange because this is so many people's like favorite book. I remember the early years of Goodreads, maybe like 2017. I think it came out 2017, 2018. So many people, I saw it in my feed so many times, and I was like, I don't know if this is really for me, and people have recommended to me since, but I also think that my reading has shifted since into something that somebody who could enjoy this more than I probably could have like 5 years ago. Or wait, 2017 was not 5 years ago. But yeah, the synopsis talks about something in the second paragraph that hasn't happened yet. So I'm interested to see if the action really picks up. But we're following a young girl named Vasya, and this is Russian like folklore. We follow her and her siblings, and her mother died giving birth to her. And her father goes somewhere at the beginning of the book, and there's all of this stuff about him finding a wife and someone finding a wife for someone else and all of these dynamics. And he brings this woman home. She's quite young, I think, and she sees spirits. She's like considered mad. And the people there where she came from like don't necessarily want her anymore, and they're passing her off to this man. And she sees spirits, and she keeps it completely to herself, and she just wants to appear normal and exist in this stepmother role that she never really wanted to begin with. And then one day Vasya talks about a spirit, like that's the point that I'm at. Vasya is talking about spirits in the house. There's various spirits around the property, like one who takes care of the horses and one who works in the kitchen. And Vasya refers to one of them one day, and her stepmother, I thought it was going to be a situation where she was like, oh my God, you see the spirits too? I'm not crazy. But instead she like got really mad at Vasya. I think it's still, I don't know if she can't figure out if Vasya is also mad or if the spirits are real or whatever, but she's like, we don't talk about the spirits, like don't talk about those, they're terrible, we don't believe in them. It feels very strongly about that. Then from here it says, the village's defenses weaken and evil from the forest creeps nearer. Vasilisa must call upon her dangerous gifts she has concealed. Like, I don't know anything about that. So I'm wondering if the spirits, the creatures, like, are they demons in the house or are they actually good? And then there's bad spirits coming in, or they find out that the spirits in the house are bad. Maybe the spirits are gonna battle. I don't know what Vasya's gifts really are. If it's gotten explained to us, maybe I like missed it as an explanation, but we'll see how it goes from here. I'm just hanging out at the house today. I picked up Liam from school early. He can't do hockey because he can't do that much physical activity. So we're just hanging out, and I have no doubt that I will finish this today. And hopefully, I don't feel like it's gonna be a 5, so I haven't found my first 5-star of the year yet, but hopefully this improves the ranking of the channel. I mean, the channel members are at the top of the rankings right now, but I hope they get a more like sturdy lead with a couple good numbers with this one. All right, I have finished the final book for the vlog, and here are my thoughts. There is great messaging in here. I think a lot of people can appreciate this. I see why it would be beloved by so many. It's essentially a young woman who is paving her own path and making her own decisions, who's being controlled by other people. There's a lot of other stuff going on, but I feel like that's one of the core takeaways. Also, just if you love atmospheric writing, it's snowing right now, and it was snowing in here, and that was just the perfect vibe to read this in. It was very well described, the atmosphere of the forest, and I know a lot of people love like forest fairy tale vibes. Sometimes I think I love forest fairy tale vibes, and then I read a forest fairy tale vibe and I don't, and I'm like, no wait, I don't love that thing. But sometimes I do. I've seen people use words like enchanting and whimsical when it comes to this, and there is an element of that, but it's also very sad and bleak at the same time. I don't know if that pairing necessarily worked for me. I'm just trying to like pinpoint what it was. I know I'm not a whimsical girl. I know that as well. I was grossly reminded of that last night when I tried, well, I did watch Wicked. I'm not a whimsical girl. Sometimes I think I'm a whimsical girl, and I also like dark and bleak stuff. Maybe it was the balance. I don't know. There was stuff involving like a child and an adult. That wasn't explicit in any way, but it made me very uncomfortable, which I'm sure was the point, but I didn't enjoy my time in this book very often, other than enjoying the lush description. I don't know that the writing in particular, the way she was writing characters or scenes or the plot, like it didn't do anything necessarily for me. I was just there. I was just experiencing it. I've heard that this world and the side note, okay, the fantasticalness gets really expanded as the series goes forward, and people enjoy more and more as they read on, and I think that's fantastic. I won't be continuing. I did get an inkling in that first half of where her power and like magic, the magic idea was coming from. I just didn't clock it as that. So it was introduced, and I think that element is interesting. I think the idea of like the forest demon is interesting, but actually reading it, I just didn't care and I was bored. And I really just feel like I have betrayed the besties. Like I should have loved all of these things. When I look at Hannah's other favorites, also, I literally, when I started this, I said I was gonna do the math differently because I did the math wrong last year. I swear I'm not this bad at math, but for some reason, when I have to come on camera and talk to you, I'm really bad at math. Last year I messed up some of the numbers, and so I was like, this year I'll do it really simply and I'll just count up the ratings and do the points that way. But I couldn't even get the math right with these little cards. Hannah having this as a favorite, I think makes sense with all of these. Nothing I would say here is like a comp for this. They all are more bleak, more whimsical. And I would say it's like the writing for a lot of these. It's probably the writing that Hannah really loves to delve into. But when I was doing the math with the numbers, even when I introed this, you might have seen a little asterisk beside some people because I did the math wrong when I was speaking, and then I had to redo it in the edit. And I even have to redo it right now because Hannah's number is wrong, because I couldn't decide when I was making the cards if I wanted, or when I was adding them up in the spreadsheet, if this is so pointless to even tell you, but in case anybody did any math and realized I was an idiot, I need to call myself out. Sometimes I added up just the 4 and 5 stars because the point was to grab people who have the most 4 and 5 stars in common with me. So I added up all of their numbers and I gave them a number. But then sometimes, for some reason, even if someone had a 3, I would include that as their overall number. Not the reason that I picked them to begin with, but then just in the card I added that number. But then in Hannah's I didn't. So Hannah actually at the end would have gotten like 47 points if I added my brilliant friend in, which I didn't love. But everything else I did. Anyway, do you care? The people I selected are correct, but the math was not. That's all you need to know. And the final math is, oh God, am I gonna get this wrong too? 15.5 points I think the besties have gotten. Not them, I got 15.5 points when I read the besties' favorite books out of a possible 25. I promise. I'm not this stupid all the time. I could have gotten 25 points in today's video and I got 15.5, which doesn't sound like horrific, but I just feel like I'm letting everyone down because the first video should have been the most like successful and satisfying. I did find a couple 4 stars. So hooray for me, hooray for you. I think the besties have great taste. I'm sad I didn't love everything, and now I don't want people to tell me, oh, you should have picked this book, you should have picked this book. Maybe it would have gotten more, maybe, This is the first of 4 videos, and the other ones I hope go incredible. And I just need to say goodbye and move on. I'm actually gonna film a clip for my next episode right now. Okay, bye!